The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome back to the Personal Safety Show. We have a special treat. We have some representatives from the State Line Rifle Association. They are Glenn Garamoni and Emilia Czyszczon. And I hope I didn't slaughter that, but I had a little lesson before we started. You both have been involved in Second Amendment rights for a while. Glenn, can you tell us your origin story?
Thanks, Marcus. I've been involved with gun rights for about 40-some years. I was always very grateful to be an American and studied the Constitution, cared about all our freedoms. And then it occurred to me through gun legislation and limiting our Second Amendment rights, I thought, well, this is a really important thing, because without the Second Amendment, we don't have any of the other rights either. It's been a long time since I've been involved. I was involved with different groups back then, and now I'm involved with newer groups.
Emilia, what's your origin story?
I would say mine's a little bit different. In my family, I grew up in a household without firearms. Nobody ever really talked about firearms. Nobody talked about the Second Amendment. So a very, very different background. I remember probably the first thing when I reflect back on this is I was in the Chicago public school system, and I remember one of the things that was required of every third grader was to write an essay on how to decrease handgun violence in Chicago, and this was what third graders had to write about. English is my second language, so what did I know as a third grader about gun violence or handgun legislation? When I was a third grader, didn't really think much of it, sort of thought that this is just how things are, that the only people that have firearms are criminals and police officers. It took kind of a long time before I was exposed to firearms from more of a different perspective. I went to school in Indiana and didn't quite understand why people like to shoot stuff in their backyards, generally on farms. That was a very big culture shock growing up from a city, being exposed to firearms in a very different manner.
I also understand you're an instructor. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I am an instructor. I was certified through the USCCA. One of the reasons I became an instructor is because of the State Line Rifle Association. I was exposed to some of our events, including our family fun shoot and our monthly shoots. And one of the things I wanted to do after I had the opportunity to participate as a participant at the family fun shoot is I wanted to volunteer and to be able to teach other people. So for that reason, really solely that reason, I became an instructor so I could give back to the next new shooters.
I really want to focus on the State Line Rifle Association. That's the whole reason why you're here. Glenn, can you tell us how the State Line Rifle Association started? What was the impetus for forming this group?
Well, State Line Rifle Association started out as a grassroots club of the Illinois State Rifle Association. They had grassroots clubs all over Illinois. That's how we started out in 1992. The main thing was getting concealed carry for Illinois. That's when the movement for concealed carry started all over the country, and that's what we worked on originally. In 2000, the ISRA changed leadership, and they didn't want grassroots clubs anymore for some reason. So we renamed our club to State Line Rifle, and we continued doing the same thing that we always did without the ISRA as our parent club.
Emilia, what type of events do SLRA State Line members participate in? What type of events do you guys have? Are there regular meetings, regular things that you guys do? Any upcoming events? Please tell us.
I'll start with some of our monthly reoccurring events. So we have every second Tuesday of the month, we have monthly club shoots at the North Shore Sports Club in Lake Forest at 7 o'clock p.m. We usually ask new folks who have never been there to come a little bit earlier, meet some of the folks, as well as attend the safety briefing. And this is a great opportunity for folks to get to know other members, as well as have the opportunity for some instruction, have the opportunity to try different firearms. As we like to say, try before you buy. This is really great. Every fourth Tuesday of the month, we have monthly meetings at the American Legion in Round Lake Park at 7 o'clock. Each month, we have a speaker ranging from candidates, current elected officials, to various folks that have knowledge in the firearms community, instructors speaking on a variety of topics for our members. And then coming up, we have on May 20th, we have our Family Fun Shoot. This is an event we usually have twice a year, usually one in May and one in September. So the early one is in May 20th on a Saturday. It is at Wisconsin Sportsmen's Association. Anybody that attends will have the opportunity to try out various firearms, pistols, revolvers, rifles, shotguns, muzzle loaders. You don't really get an event where you get to try all this in one place.
What's the cost to attend an event like this?
It's $25 for adults, $10 for ages 11 through 17, and free for anybody under 11 with a paid parent.
Okay, and I'm guessing they buy ammunition there.
No. All firearms and ammunition are included in the price of admission. We provide our own firearms, so we know that they're safe. We don't allow people to bring their own personal firearms to the event. The ammunition is provided by the NRA Foundation, so we get the ammunition at no cost. So that's how we can afford to keep the prices for admission low. The only extra that you have to pay for is $7 if you want to eat lunch from the Boy Scouts.
I will tell you, as someone who's been involved in the firearms industry, that is a steal, an absolute steal. If you go to a range and you want to rent a pistol, it's about $10 to $12 plus ammo at retail prices. So just to use one pistol at a shooting range is the same cost as an all-day shoot. It sounds like it's unlimited. Well, until you run out of ammunition, but it sounds like there's a lot.
We don't run out, Marcus.
I bet not. I bet not. I hope to see some people there. Glenn, how many members do you have, and how can someone join?
We have approximately 100 members, paid members. We get new members almost every month, so, it changes. Some people don't renew, and then we get new ones, so it stays around 100 or so, a little bit more, I think. To join, you need to get the application either at our website or at our meeting. It's $24 a year. And one of the benefits you get from that, besides being able to hear the speakers at our meetings and learn about firearm news, legislative news, things like that, it includes $10 for an hour range time at North Shore Sparks Club, like Emilia talked about. So if you're a member, instead of paying $20 for an hour range time, you pay $10 if you're a member.
That's one time, or is that?
No, every month.
Wow. Okay.
Every month you can shoot for $10.
Well, at North Shore, that is also a steal. This sounds like a great deal. So if you're interested, what is the website that someone can go to and or social media information?
It's State Line Rifle, all one word, .com. And we're on Facebook at State Line Rifle Association Facebook.
What else has the State Line Rifle Association been involved in as far as political advocacy, lawsuits, the big things that are in the firearms news these days?
State Line Rifle is raising money for SADAC, which is the Second Amendment Defense Education Coalition, which is one of the lawsuits brought against the state of Illinois for the so-called assault weapons ban. So we're involved in that. A lot of our members go to iGold every year, Illinois Gun Owners Lobby Day, where we go down to Springfield and we visit and lobby our legislators, our state reps, state senators, to encourage them to leave our gun rights alone. What else do? We go to town hall meetings, different elected officials.
What are some things that are happening? What are some additional thoughts that you'd like to share with everyone to get them motivated to participate in groups like this?
Well, if you value your Second Amendment rights, you got to get involved in some way or another. And our club has a lot of experienced people that have been doing this for a long time. And you can get tips and information and learn how to approach elected officials. And we have a lot of really knowledgeable guys as far as firearms. So come to our meetings, you'll learn about various firearms, new stuff that you've never seen before. We have a show and tell usually. People bring in a gun and explain what it is and how it works and what it's for.
Emilia, can you share with everyone that some additional thoughts about the firearms community?
One of the things that I also really like about the State Line Rifle Association that I also want to mention is that because we have those monthly shoots, it's another place for camaraderie. It's another place to keep you honest if you're a new shooter that's, looking to learn from other people, looking to be able to gain that confidence to be able to start going to the range by yourself or start, being able to do certain things on your own. I think that knowledge share from both just going to the range is very important, but there's so much you're able to learn from other folks on the legislation side. If you're interested in Second Amendment advocacy, as Glenn mentioned, how to talk to your representatives, especially if they're on the other side of the aisle than you, how to talk to family members about firearms that may not have the same views as you, and then how to invite those people to have those conversations and show them how fun this really is, and not just the fun part, but what it really means to be a gun owner, value the Second Amendment, to be able to defend yourself, and of course, still at the end of the day, be able to have fun in a safe environment.
So for our listeners, I basically have a set of questions that I ask, and then other things pop up. This is not a planned question, but I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of research. I've written a couple books, and I just started a book on mass violence written. I'm not going to say the name of it because I don't want to embarrass anyone, but it's written by a PhD. And I'm a couple pages in, and he talked about assault weapons, assault machine guns at mass shootings. And he also talked about the 30-round clips, which immediately turned me off. How do you determine what is a good source of information? I'm going to read the rest of the book, but just the terminology in the first couple pages is used incorrectly. I was very shocked by it. Apparently, this is not a gun person who's writing about gun people. How do you gauge what's a quality educational resource?
I've been around a while, so those words like gun control, which I would call civilian disarmament, clip. A clip is not what goes in the bottom of a semi-auto. So that immediately says this guy doesn't know anything about guns, and he's just trying to vilify them to the public.
Emilia, can you add to that?
Kind of laugh when we talk about clips because in a lot of the communities with women, we like to, when we're first teaching women, what is a magazine, what is a clip, the proper terminology, is we like to say, a clip isn't something that goes into your semi-automatic firearm, it's something that goes into your hair. So we like to differentiate it that way to, start from the beginning, ensuring that people know the correct terminology. And I would encourage if somebody's just getting started in this community or starting to learn what this is all about, what this all means, to take a class from somebody, from a good instructor who can explain that terminology very simply from day one to make sure that you know what you're talking about and not just reading and assuming that what you read is correct.
Thank you. I'm going to give you guys something. I did this as a joke. I give out swag, and I have binder clips that say Firearm Mentor. So I wait in class until someone refers to a magazine as a clip.
Cool.
And then I say, hey, that's not a clip. Here's a clip. And I make it funny, and then people remember. And I also tell them in class, look, if you call a magazine a clip, the worst thing that's going to happen is I will stick my tongue out at you. And then that'll be your indicator that you're using the wrong word.
While the formal part of the interview ended, we kept the recording equipment going and had a very interesting conversation afterwards. I wanted to share some of that with you today, so you get to listen to what we would talk about at one of these SLRA events. And it's just a regular conversation. It's less formal and more natural. Enjoy.
So I found this group through politics when I ran for office.
Oh, okay.
When did you run for office? When and where did you run for
Here
office?
in Lake County in 2020.
Did we invite you to speak? Is that how you found out about us?
No, I was actually knocking on doors in Round Lake Park area. And Dick Barr wrote on Facebook, he's like, "Oh, there's this event," and I was like, "Well, I'm already here. I might as well stop by." So,
okay. So you ran for a county seat?
I ran for Recorder of Deeds.
Run again.
I ran to get rid of the position, and that referendum passed.
Oh,
so.
Cool.
Can't run for it again.
Okay. All right, sweet.
So actually got eliminated this year at the end of 2022.
Okay. Well, I still would encourage you to run again because
You could run for something better like state rep maybe.
Not in my area.
Or county board.
yeah, no kidding, no
I
kidding.
have to run for a larger position.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
kind
I'd
of
be
funny.
running against Bob Morgan.
That would be a beautiful thing.
Or,
I don't think there's enough Republicans there.
There
so
aren't, and
That's the
it's
problem.
my old state rep. He doesn't even have an opponent ever.
Oh yeah, friggin' same thing. I mean, people are like, "Why don't you run?" I was like, "It's not worth."
It's a pay cut
Yeah, I mean it is
for some people.
But yeah, no, it really is. But it's not. It's more so if people are going to donate money, donate to a winnable seat because that's
Right.
Just,
Yep.
And Congress is also coming kind of hard in this area.
It's tougher if
too.
you live in Deerfield than if you live by me. But
That's true.
even by me, it's getting tough for Republicans to get elected.
There's very interesting amount of gun owners in Buffalo Grove. There's a
Yeah.
lot more, and they're quiet about it. Just in my neighborhood,
Oh yeah.
I've trained a bunch of people,
yeah.
and I know a bunch more that, let's hope the riots never come to this neighborhood
Yeah.
because they will be met with some pretty significant resistance.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
Well, I grew up in Highland Park, so probably half the school was Jewish kids, and they always taught us about the Holocaust and what happened and everything like that. And the mantra was never forget, never forget.
Right.
And so it just amazes me that they've already forgot.
There is a saying, it's called Every Jew at 22, and it's to train Jewish people. And in Rogers Park, all the religious people that walk to synagogue on the weekends, there is a movement where they're carrying guns. There's a lot of them that are carrying guns. There's a company out there called Magen, and they basically train people in synagogues who carry for that reason, for the reason of security. And
People in Rogers Park are probably more conservative than the people in Buffalo Grove. And
I would
Highland
say
Park,
so. I would say so. But then there's also something where on the Sabbath you're not supposed to work. So carrying a gun is technically work, but it's also considered life-saving. So you can go to the hospital. There are taxi companies that have deals with the Orthodox community that if someone does need to go to the hospital, they don't get charged that day so that there's no business transaction. And then the next day, the fare sends in their money.
Oh,
So
I see.
I started in hospital security many years ago when I was young, thin, and fit. Yeah, so that's how I know that.
That when I went to Purdue, we had an active shooter.
No kidding. What happened with the active shooter there?
So this was back in 2014. I was in grad school, and I remember all of a sudden everybody's getting notifications that there's a shooter on campus, multiple shooters on campus. Nobody seems to know what's happening. And there was images being sent around of actually undercover police officers, which, again, if you don't know what that looks like, you think that's the active shooter with an
Right.
AR, with battle gear, ready to go, only to find out eventually that there was only one shooter. He only shot one person in a classroom full of kids that he had a vengeance against. Like he stabbed him like 20 plus times, then shot him 20 plus times, and then surrendered to the police. But before that came out, I mean, the chaos in itself was just a disaster. I mean, my professor, I was in class, he's saying, it's like, what should I do? He didn't know what to do. And the doors did not lock from the inside, or they opened outwards, so you couldn't even barricade anything with
Right.
which was in the classroom. So there was people saying, "Oh, I'm just going to go home," and I'm thinking, "You're an idiot. You don't know where this person's at. Nobody knows where this person's at. You shouldn't be walking around." And I actually had active shooter training for having worked at a university in Detroit, at Wayne State University, where everybody as a part of their orientation was required to have active shooter training.
Was it Alice?
I don't remember. It's
Okay.
been a while, but it was something that was put together by a guy who was in the Israeli military. And so,
Can't get much better than that.
yeah. And so a lot of it was, what do you do if the shooter's outside of, walking around, wandering around with what you have? But if you don't have furniture you can move, that's a problem. The door opens out rather than in, you have a problem. Nobody knows what's going on. That's another problem. So it just was absolute chaos having to, deal with that.
One of the things I learned, if the door opens out, to take a computer cord and wrap it around the handle and find an object for the other end to wrap it around.
Yeah.
But you're right, there's not a lot of, if I'm in an active shooter situation and I take my belt off to secure the door, my pants are going to fall down, and then I can't run. That's kind of a joke, but same thing with the purse. You've got all of your stuff in the purse, and
you don't know how much time you have.
You don't know how much time you have. Are you really going to strap your purse around a door when that might be the medical card you need? That might be the medical insurance card. That might be the cell phone that you need. And all of a sudden, you're out of your element without your safety net. So no one's going to be brushing their hair during an active shooter response. But we all have personal effects that sometimes you have to give up and come back later for.
So, I mean, that was one thing. And I remember I wanted to bring what I had been trained on at another university to my university. And people looked at me like I was crazy. And this was actually before a lot of that you started hearing all about these active shooters situations happening at many, many more schools and universities. This was before all that kind of thrown out of proportion, and that's all you hear about. And
right.
Back then, you really didn't hear about it much. And we had a really great police department that could have educated large groups of students. There was talk, I think, in 2013 to allow concealed carry on campus for students. And my best friend, which I met in grad school, was one of the proponents, working with Representative Jim Lucas, who's a very big Second Amendment advocate in the Indiana state legislature. They had a pretty decent student government at the time to potentially be able to vote on that and, move it in a different direction. But they decided that it was just too controversial, too risky, that they didn't want to talk about it. And it's gone a very different direction.
I hear you. It's always been on my radar from the Lori Dan incident. Are you familiar with Lori Dan?
Mm-hmm.
So Lori Dan was
Brad Snyder's sister-in-law.
Are you kidding me?
No. Brad Snyder's wife is, what's her first name? Something Dan. And when I first, she writes letters.
Wow.
She writes letters for Brad. I got a letter from her, and I saw that name, Dan, D-A-N-N, and I remembered Lori Dan shooting.
Oh, yeah.
So I asked somebody. I said, "Is she related to that Lori Dan?" Oh yeah, that's her sister. And I never knew that.
I worked one of my previous. I have 3 stages in my career where I was a director of security at a high school. So I don't know if it was an ABC or NBC special, and we played it. And then right after that, I joined the Glencoe Police and Fire Department. They were the ones that responded. I worked with people. Were you guys it might have been our first one at the Golden Corral with the guy with the white hair who spoke.
Oh, yeah, I went to that one.
He was my boss.
Yeah, okay.
He was my boss.
Now
And
I know all the
he
story.
saved one of the kids that got shot in the chest because he violated paramedic protocol. They were supposed to treat him on scene. He said, nope, throw him in the ambulance. We're hauling rear end to get to the hospital. And they did, and his life was saved.
Driving through Glencoe when I was young, because we'd be south fishing down at the beach.
Yeah.
And I'd have all these poles hanging out of my station wagon, and the cops would always pull me over. Never give me a ticket, but they always, we'd be driving home at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. Oh, one thing I didn't mention, just so your listeners know, I'm sure they know about Gun Save Life, but State Line is an affiliate. I guess we pay our dues to Gun Save Life.
I didn't know that.
I've been a member since the beginning of Gun Save Life. I met John Bach back in, I don't know, mid-90s maybe. There was a guy named John Birch. It was called Concealed Carry Incorporated. And he used to have these meetings at his house in Oak Brook. And John Bach was there. A lot of those guys from the early Gun Save Life group were there. And we, State Line Rifle, we take 50 copies of Gun News every month. And we distribute them. And we have our ad in the paper and everything.
Oh, are you guys doing the CPR thing? Did you guys get a hold of it?
I haven't reached out to that guy yet, but I'm planning on it. Yeah.
I can help advertise that.
Okay.
So I do all sorts of weird expos, and I did a boutique-y, it was all women and me selling gun stuff. And I'm setting up my table, and I had introduced myself to the people around me. We're all friendly. And I heard, it sounded like half a gag, half of a grunt behind me. I turned around. There was a guy clutching his chest and fell on his face. He had a 1-minute lung seizure. I just had the training. One other person there had the training, and everyone's mouth stood there with their mouth open, not knowing what to do. Mm-hmm. She and I jumped into action. We rolled him on his side. He ultimately came to. He was, I don't want to say combative, but he was resistant. He wanted to get up, and we're like, no, you stay down. Because if he got up and his blood pressure was messed up, he'd fall on his face. And part of his tooth was on the ground. There was blood coming out of his nose and his mouth. He went to the hospital. Turns out he was diabetic. He did not know that. And he just had a cheeseburger and a milkshake. And they took his blood sugar, and it was 450. He came out of it.
Yeah.
I told him some really bad jokes. He wasn't that interested because he didn't feel good. But he was very appreciative that we helped him. And I'm going to call him probably Wednesday just to see how he's doing.
I don't really know much about CPR. We did have John Krupa's Spartan group. We did the trauma class, and that was very worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't really know CPR. I should take a class.
Yeah, that's something I've been kind of asking around to see who can potentially give State Line a class.
Well, they're great instructors.
Yeah.
And the one thing that they told me that I did, the best thing you can do for someone is comfort them.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I rubbed the guy's back, not in a weird way, but I rubbed the guy's back, I rubbed the guy's arm. I tried to hold his hand, but he didn't have control over his hand. Ultimately, though, he was okay, and his partner was freaked out a lot of it. So I stayed there and helped him out, just talked to him, and he didn't know what to do. He might sign up for a CPR class. You never know.
I've done a lot of things in my life, even though I'm not that old, but one of the other things that I did one summer is I got my EMT license.
Oh, no kidding.
This was, back in 2011. And I took an 8-week class, which is really intense. You normally take it in 16 weeks, but I wasn't doing anything else. So it wasn't too bad. That's what I had planned on doing on weekends to kind of help pay for school. But then I ended up getting a better job, so I didn't end up doing that. But one of the things we were taught as EMTs is if you're on an ambulance and you're picking somebody up, most likely it's the worst day of their lives.
Yes.
So you have to, same thing if you're having to do first aid, that's beyond just a scratch, calling 911 or someone passes out or you have to do CPR, it's most likely not a pleasant day for them. So what you're saying to comfort them goes a long way.
It calms them.
Yeah.
And well, thank you both for taking the time to come and be interviewed. And if there's listeners out there, please find Glenn and Emilia at the event on May 20th. Introduce yourself to them. Tell them, I heard about you on the radio. And then it'll all click and we'll be able to make new friends. So thank you very much. And everyone have a happy Mother's Day.
Stay safe out there. And pretty soon, I'll see you at the shooting range. This is Marcus Melnick with Firearm Mentor, signing off. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.